basically what I'll talk about is how visualization is useful and really how it combines with healing as well. And much of the time, I would say it's going to be pragmatic. It's hopefully skills you and myself can do for ourselves to mobilize our health and healing. So that's the major part. There are a few biases, I might as well lay them right out, of what I would expect. I think first, if I look at visualization, if I look at healing, if I look at human potential, I would say the limits of our imagination are the limits of our experience. And you look at me. No, yes, maybe. Now let me say it again. The limits of our imagination are really the limits of our experience. And the reason I want to state this, and let me take examples from sports if you don't mind. You know, most of you know about the 4-minute mile which Bannister ran, right? A number of years ago, the first 4-minute mile. Before that time, when it was run, physiologists used to say that people could not run a 4-minute mile. And in fact, if you could run a 4-minute mile, you would die. Literally, I mean, that's the whole many people make those claims in physiology, that in fact the human body was not capable of doing that kind of performance. Somehow this runner, Bannister, did do the 4-minute mile. And did you know in the next 3 months, 8 other people ran a 4-minute mile? It meant somehow that they were ready their physiology was ready, however their limits of belief wasn't before that time. Bannister set the belief, he made the possibility to occur. And once they saw the potential was there to run a 4-minute mile, they then allowed themselves to run that fast as well. Again, if I take a few examples in sports, though, I mean, since I work with the gymnastics team, it's often interesting to observe what other countries do. And so you can go to a world championship and you see somebody do a unique new move. No one has ever done this before, a different twist or whatever. And what is so shocking is that 3 months later you go to a local state meet and 2 or 3 kids will do this new twist. Again, pointing out that if we can perceive the possibility, then in fact some of us will allow ourselves to do it. And so if there's one theme underlying this whole lecture today is be sure, what are you imaging? And I think I want to make it a very strong point. And what I mean by imaging, some of us, right, don't image. Would that be right? You know, you really don't image, right? Isn't that familiar for some of you? You just think words, you may hear sounds, but no pictures. What I'm doing for the moment, I make no separation when I talk about visualization and imagery between whether it's a kind of verbal imagery, auditory, tactilely, kinesthetic, or 3-dimensional TV pictures. They are to me, for the moment, the same. All I would say is that any thought or image which might carry in my brain will affect my body. So the premise one, the major premise then is, I said earlier, limits of our beliefs are the limits of our experience. Premise 2, mind, body, spirit are interconnected. They are not separate. What I think, feel, ruminate about, anticipate affects my body at this instant of time. And be very careful what you think. I mean, I now tend to think of imagery pollution. You know, we have chemical pollution, right, which is harmful for our health. I would say in the same way, I can perceive imagery pollution to be equally true. Our brains do not separate out between what is imagined and what is real. Let me take you for an example. Do you mind? There are hundreds of examples I can do, but this one is an old classic one, which I think will work. What I'd like you to do is make yourself more comfortable. Do you mean all this time you sat uncomfortably? So the third rule, I would say, is it helps to be aware and listen to my body and be at least somewhat comfortable. Okay. So hopefully you're more comfortable. What I'm going to guide you in a moment, I'm going to guide you through a very short relaxation exercise. That's one. And then ask you to go for an imagery exercise. All right. Just as you're more comfortable, what I'd like you to do in a moment, while you continue to breathe easily, I'd like you to press your ankles together, your knees together, tighten your buttocks, bring your arms up like this, tighter and tighter, really tight, clench your jaw tight. How many of you are holding your breath? Forget about it, let it go. Didn't I ask you to continue to breathe? I did. So I could go down my list. Let me add one more rule to this whole piece. If the one item you can take home seriously from visualization, healing, if you can continue to breathe all the time, I think one's health will be radically improved. And I'll probably make that point a number of times. And so this time, in a moment, not yet, remember I'm going to ask you to tighten your muscles. Keep breathing, please, honest. It's much more comfortable. Then at the end, I'd like you to tighten your muscles, and then at the end, I'd like you to let yourself go totally limp and loose. Like that, okay? All right, let's do it. I'd like you to press your ankles together, tighten your knees together, tighten your buttocks together, bring your arms up, clench your jaw. Continue to breathe, remember? Notice how easy it is to hold your breath when you tighten your arms? Are you breathing? You forgot, right? Shame. Okay, keep breathing. And now take a deep breath and let all go limp and loose. And let your eyes sort of be closed. Let the whole body just sort of sink almost through the chair. Note the weight of your hands right against your lap. And maybe just for a moment, as you exhale, say to yourself, relax. And as you inhale, on the inhalation, say, I am. So on the inhalation, I am. On the exhalation, relaxed. And as you do that, some of you may even want to imagine like you have flexi straws right down your arms. And so as you exhale, you could almost imagine like the warm air going right down the arms and just coming out of your fingers. And just do this with yourself for a moment. So on the inhalation, I am, and the exhalation, relaxed. And now let it just go, let your eyes be closed still. And now what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to imagine a lemon. You know, the sign sun-kissed stamped right on the side and the two chubby ends. Just imagine it for a moment. Some of us will see it in living color, others will see it in black and white, and a third of us will just have a sense for it. Whatever is your style, it's unimportant. Now I'd like you to get your kitchen knife, and I'd like you to slice the lemon right in half. And as you do that, notice it took more tension in your arm. Notice you may even have held your breath. And after you've cut the lemon in half, put the knife to the side. Now I'd like you to take the half lemon, hold it in your hand, look at it for a moment. Notice the outer yellow rind, the pale whitish inner rind, the half-cut pits, the droplets of lemon juice. And now just gently get a glass. And now I'd like you to squeeze this half lemon with your hand so the juice goes right in the glass. And as you squeeze, notice the pressure in your fingertips. You can feel the droplets of lemon juice against your skin. You can hear the plopping of the pits and pulp. Feel the tightness in your arm as you're squeezing your shoulder. After you squeezed one half lemon, put it to the side. Now take another half lemon, squeeze that also. After you've squeezed all of that, put the half lemons to the side. Now take the glass and gently lift it towards your lips. And as you lift it towards your lips and finally let the glass just rest against your lip, notice the coolness of the glass against your lips. Now gently tilt the glass, open your mouth slightly, taste and swallow the lemon juice. Okay, I think that's probably enough. Let me just ask, because I wonder, how many of you swallowed? Just look at yourselves for a sec. How many of you noticed an increase in saliva? Now just look. How many of you noticed a puckering of the mouth? I would say almost all of you had an autonomic, a body response. Autonomic meaning salivation. You have no voluntary control over it, and yet we sort of elicited it. Notice that's what the image of a lemon does. Now imagine the image I do when I rehash anger, resentment, negative feelings. I wonder what it does to my body as well. There's really, for the brain and body, there appears to be no difference between whether I actually eat the lemon, notice I salivate, or I do the imaginary eating of a lemon. The body responded. So I would just say, be careful what you think or what you image. Well, let me take that point for a moment of negative images. Because we did a study a while ago with Meyer and Coley and myself, where all we did was we monitored the muscles in someone's back. So we monitor the muscles in the back and the forehead, and then all we asked the people is to imagine either angry events, sadness, happiness, or sort of a quiet day. And what's so intriguing is that when we monitored the subject, that for a number of them, those who reacted by tightening their muscles, but those who imagined sadness or anger tended to have a massive increase of muscle bracing in these muscles. And that is no different in a way than the salivation. And so if I sit here, or I go home and I drive my car and I keep ruminating, do you know what I mean? Ruminating, you keep thinking, rehashing an old argument, or an old resentment. In a sense, the only person most likely I'm damaging is myself. And so again, the question is, how can I let that go? I would want to really be careful about our imagery. I talked about imagery pollution already earlier. The other part is, what are the images? Remember, the limits of our belief are the limits of our experiences. What are the images we perceive for ourselves? What are the stereotypes which I perceive outside myself? What is my stereotype when I'm going to be 60, 70? When I retire, what is my stereotype? Is it I'm going to be exciting? I'm going to be able to jog, go swimming? Or is the image I see that I'm going to be old and have a cane? Which is the image in your head? What is the image? I mean, I purposely use the image of old age, older age. I'd say that's a better word to use. So often our social stereotypes of older age, what are they? What do you perceive? Do you see it as people who are really sharp, sparkly, asking questions? Yes? No? At least what I would say is check what one's images are. And at least it seems to me, if my images of old age, which are my cultural images at times, stereotypes, I don't even know, which at times have become part of me. If those are ones of failure, of being damaged, of being old, or whatever it is, whatever I do, I may end up becoming those. Just like the lemon becomes the I salivate. So check one's own images. What are they? Do I want that image to continue? I'll leave that note as such. I won't really go on that note at all. Let me see. Let me just talk one more part about images. Because images is what we become. I already talked about the positive ones, right? About the 4-minute mile, about the gymnasts. You know, we use imagery all the time, which is so intriguing. If you talk to very successful businessmen, world-class athletes, there really is no difference. They tend to mentally rehearse their future performance. Are you familiar with what I mean by mental rehearsal? Yes, no? You know, what it means is that I'm going to go to a business meeting, I mentally sort of do my talk and I expect what will happen back and forth. I sort of rehearse what will happen and I develop all my alternative answers. That phenomenon is common to top performers. It is important, however, to image the right things. And let me give an example. I was with the ski team in Sun Valley this February or January, and it was intriguing because we interviewed a golfer. And this golfer had difficulty because whenever we went to the golf course, he took his golf, whatever it is, you know. I've never played golf, so he took this club and then he swung right, and he did real well, except this golf course has a pond. And whenever he came to whatever that hole is, right, he would look at the pond and he would always think, my ball is going to go into the pond. Is that familiar, those who play? What is so exciting, I thought, that he was always right. You know, that momentary transient image going through that person's brain of perceiving that ball leaving and going lovely in the center of the pond is what often became reality. And you know, and we forget how quick those thoughts and images go through our heads. Let me do another one. This is from gymnastics, from a regional meet. Here you do beam routines. And what does a coach often say to someone? Don't fall. What comes in your head when someone says don't fall? And what's so exciting is that the kids often tend to fall more then. Let me do one from the ski team. It's the same idea. If you do a race and the kids watch, these are the young kids aged 14 through 16, and they ski down the gates, the slalom gate. It's just lovely, you can just ski right through. And and someone tells them, gate number 5 is real difficult. What happens in a person's head? You watch out. What happens when you tend to watch out? You tighten up. And what is so, again, I consider it really exciting, what you now do, if you watch gate 5, more and more people start falling there. And and what's so, it's real, the challenge is to be able to let those negative images go. And it's not easy, just never think of a pink elephant. What color was it? How can I not be caught by those images? And so, again, when I think of performances, remember what I think is what it becomes. Let me do one more piece on that imagery part, and I'll come back to it later. And here comes from sports, and it applies with other things as well. Since I said that what we think, that our bodies doesn't separate between what we imagine and reality, it's a lovely way to learn skills. Let me give an example in sports again. Let's say I ski, and in the middle of, I do a disastrous fall. I don't know any of you ever happened to any of you, but you do a horrible fall, or you go horseback riding, you get flipped from a horse, and so you fall, and then you get scared, right? And the next time you go horseback riding, what do you imagine? The fear of falling. Because you have that one experience, and next time you get back on the horse, let's say that, I for a moment see myself in my imagination falling, so I keep imaging that. What I could do at the same time is I could, in my imagination, see myself not falling. I could see myself just riding easily. I could go back over that same course, and now I go back horseback riding over that same course, and I would just continue in my imagination to rehearse mentally many, many times the course, doing it perfectly. Not doing the course by not falling. That still pulls that imaging of falling, but just doing the course perfectly. And if I do that, then after a while in my brain I have one event of falling, but 500 events of not falling. What does it mean the next time I go to the course? Essentially, there's much less fear, because most likely I will not fall. So at least in our performances we have fears. We may be able to use some of this. The other part is that I can start, as I image, my imagination doesn't always want to go as I want it to go. Any of you ever had that experience? You imagine something, right? Let's take the sport example for a moment. I can imagine myself skiing perfectly down the slope. And I always see myself fall at gate 5. And so then I have to start looking at what do I do at gate 5 and how can I change it. So it can be a useful technique if I choose to, and to attend, is what are my fears, my anticipations, and other parts I associate with those places. So it can be a useful growing technique. Okay, let me go back for a moment, because I could talk about this area of imagery and healing, but let me backtrack for a moment. Because if I ask, how can I encourage visualization techniques or learning? How can it be most beneficial? It's our hypothesis that if I can be relaxed, quiet, then the imagery most likely will have more power and potency. So the first step in a way to be useful is for me to get quieter and to be more relaxed. And I would say that part by itself also facilitates healing. Because overall I could weave an argument here that when we tend to tighten up, become hyper-reactive, or we are exposed to stressors, to stress, loud noises, our bodies react, and that kind of chronic reactivity is contributory to illness onset. I think most of you probably agree, at least if you read the popular press, right? So the first step then is probably, how can I avoid illness onset? By relaxing, that's one, or staying relaxed while doing a task. And second, How can I learn a kind of separate relaxation technique so I can become so quiet that I can then on top of that do imagery rehearsal for health, for remedial work, meaning how can I help facilitate my own healing, and second, how can I maybe develop my own potential. Let me do it those ways. So what I like to do for the next hour or so is more go in those two directions, if that feels comfortable. So I like to first weave, well, I don't even have to weave an argument. I think I want to just share one or two strategies and techniques by which we can probably become a little more relaxed during our daily lives. And hopefully we can do this anywhere, under any stressor. So if the other piece you would take with me, the one piece I said is please keep breathing, right? And the other piece hopefully you'll take with you is that if I come to a stressor, like my spouse is beating me up, or my boss is yelling at me, or I drive down the freeway, somebody cuts in front of me, or I rehash an argument, or I think, do I have enough money to pay PG&E? All these minor stressors, you're familiar with those? Each time I have the opportunity to think of one of those, or instead of, I use these as opportunities for me now to practice a mini relaxation technique. Is that valid? And note how to change it. Now, what techniques can you practice? Well, there are hundreds of them, literally. I mean, I could imagine lying on the beach in Baja, California, or Florida. That'd be one, right? So now next time I drive down the highway here, somebody cuts in front of me, instead of me yelling and screaming, I say, gosh, thank you for this opportunity to relax for a moment. Is that how you want to do it? We laugh that way, but I'll never forget a man who we worked with, who had some insomnia, severe insomnia, and he always got woken up by noises, by trains. And I don't know why he moved, and he moved next to a railroad track. And so he moved, and he couldn't sleep at all, it seems. So then we taught him a little relaxation technique, and he had to practice this every time the train came by, when he started hearing the noise. Notice what we did? Instead of saying the train is a bad sound or anything, we said, this is just a signal for you to start practicing your relaxation. What was so exciting about it, he almost never practiced exercise and he slept the whole night long. That process is very because I have changed the concept. I've changed that stressor, that stimuli which impacts upon me. And the stimuli can be in my own brain, to which I react. And so in that way, I think it is important if I can use that kind of concept that now stressors become opportunities for me to enhance my own self and voluntary control for health. So in a way, instead of being a victim, a reactor to stimuli which impinge upon me, I can now initiate action. And I use the stressor, I want to say again, as the opportunity for me to practice a relaxation techniques. What ones can we practice? I said I can image lying on the beach. I could do hundreds of them. I could meditate for an instant. I could let all my muscles go limp. There are hundreds. But let me just share one or two with you which at least are somewhat, we found physiologically useful. The one I borrowed is from Chuck Strobel at the Institute of Living at Hartford, Connecticut, which he developed. So I'm really borrowing his techniques and hopefully teach it. And it's based upon the idea, when we are stressed, what happens? What happens when you get startled? When a loud noise occurs, what happens to your body? Where do you tighten? Okay, others. Tighten the shoulders. Right? What happens to your breath? You go, right? Or you shallow breathe. Ever have that experience where you get a near car collision, your hands almost tingle? You get sweaty palms afterwards. Is that familiar to a few of you? So let me look at the mechanics of the alarm reaction, that fight-flight response we give many, many times during the day. What are they? Well, on a simplistic level, I would say it tends to be that I tend to brace. I tighten my musculature. I often clench and frown at the same time. Is that familiar, that kind of picture you've seen, frowning, clenching? That's one. Second, I tend to shallow breathe or hold my breath. Third, I get an adrenaline release. And I get a shift in that means that my blood vessels shrink in the periphery and widen in the deep muscles. I'm getting ready to fight or flight. I get a whole hormonal release as well, biochemical release, which really shifts my body to activation. So if that happens, and it happens only if I go like this, at that instant, some of you with a loud noise would react slightly. And if we recorded you electrophysiologically with equipment, we could see some of you starting to perspire, some of you would brace your muscles, even though we would not know it. But before doing the exercise, maybe I should point it out. What I like is maybe you can become aware of it, okay? Do you mind that your bodies may change? You want to be my guinea pig? What's your name? Jack. Jack?
No, John.
John, okay. What I'll do, John, is what I want to do is I'm going to take your arm. Now let me take it. What we just observed, thank you, is our helping, is our anticipatory response. But maybe I want to take the other arm. Okay, let me take this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just move it very gently and passively for you. Okay? Without you helping. Oh, in a moment I'm going to ask all of you to do that. I just want to make a point. Okay. You see what I'm doing? That's all. In a moment I'm going to ask all of you to do this with the person next to you, is take your partner's arm. Don't do it simultaneously. Okay? And I'd like you just to let the arm be totally limp and loose, just like I'm doing. And then I'd like you to do it quietly and then I'll ask something. All right? Do you mind? Okay. Thank you, John. Please make yourself partners for a moment and just do that. Could you do it, please, quietly for a moment? Really observe that the person is not helping you or hindering. Do it very slowly. Please let it be totally quiet for a moment. Just allow that arm to be moved passively. And now while you're doing this, while the arm is passively moved, I like the person in a moment, not yet, just when I say, in a moment when I indicate it, I would like the person to share something with you which is truly embarrassing for them. Okay, that's enough. What happened to the arm? No, you don't have to do it. No, please don't share, honest. I'm just intrigued to know what happened to some of your arms. The arms stay just as loose. Know what happened? In that momentary, even just thinking about a future event, was that right? That in the future, I was going to ask you to say something embarrassing. What happened to your arm? It tightened. Did that happen to a number of you? Yes, no? Yes. Someone said the arm gets lighter. How can an arm get lighter? No. It floats. The arm got lighter because at that moment I went like this. I tightened up unbeknown to myself. So if I did not react at all, if I did not care, the arm would stay totally heavy, totally limp. The moment even someone suggested to think of an embarrassing event, I go, and the arm floats up. That's just a muscular bracing. Imagine if we ask something truly stressful to think about or to do. Our bodies react to bracing. Do you mind? I want to do something totally different. I just want to check your attention span. No, I'd like you all to quickly look from one side of the room to the other. Do you mind when just with your eyes when I snap my fingers? How many of you held your breath? Remember the alarm reaction, right? What I said is muscular bracing. Some of you could experience just by a simple thought of rehashing a potentially embarrassing event. Second, most of you probably could have observed that when I asked that same question, you probably for a moment shallow breath, oh my God, or something you would say to yourself. You held your breath for shallow breath. Or when I do a cognitive task, like I look from the right to the left. It makes no difference. When I think, when I image, when I work hard, I concentrate at times. I hold my breath. Again, triggering that mini alarm reaction. Okay. I'm going to point out we do this hundreds of times. We don't even know it. If we do too many of those in a row, I think at times illness onset will occur. Let's say it that way. Or may occur. Who knows if it will. I don't want to... The limits of my beliefs, you see, I want to keep it as a may. I want to have the out. Okay. Now what could I do instead? I think probably the easiest way to do is I could probably reverse the same alarm reaction and do it in a reverse pattern. And so what I could do is I could smile. Why would I want to smile? If I smile, notice I change my facial characters from the clenching and frowning. When I smile, these muscles become flaccid. They become totally relaxed. So I can smile. That reverses then the muscular bracing in some of my face. That's step one. I would want to point out that it may not be obvious, if you talk to your supervisor at work, or he's talking to you, let's say it that way, he or she, and you feel stressed and you go, I am not truly sure if that would be the appropriate impact you would like to make. However, what I now talk about is smiling on the inside, like an internal smile or sparkle. Does that make sense? So what I now think of is if I feel stressed, I can mentally sparkle to the right and to the left. It's a kind of internal smile. And no one will have to know. That's one. Two, I like to take a gentle, deep breath, or gentle breath diaphragmatically in my abdomen. So it means that as I inhale, my tummy bubbles out a little bit more. As I exhale, my abdomen falls in. So I sparkle, right? And now the next response is breath holding, remember? I reverse that by gently breathing in and letting go. And as I let the air go out, more or less out of my mouth, I let my jaws go slack slightly. No, because often we clench our jaws still. So I remember on the exhalation, let the jaws go slack. And see if I could imagine that I could allow a flow of warm air, the air goes out of my mouth, to go right down my arms, like down, as if I have straws inside of it, if that image makes sense. Go right out the arms and out my fingers, the air. Does that image make sense for some of you? Just practice that sub part for me. I believe all of you can sparkle and smile, so I don't have to practice that one. Just for a moment, practice the next step, and that's a gentle breath in your abdomen. And then gently blow the air right down your arms. Does it feel fairly comfortable to do? Can I have John? You want to be my guinea pig again? It's so nice to sit in the front row. I'd like all of you to work together for a moment, because I think we can help imaging it even more. So what I'm going to ask each of you to do with your partner in a moment is encourage that feeling tone of the streaming down your arms and just check how it works. What I'm going to ask John to do is take a gentle deep breath. And then when he exhales, he lets it go out his mouth, right? Ha. As he does that, I'm going to squeeze his arms downward. Why don't we do it together, okay? As if I'm pulling the air right down his hands. Is that clear what I'm doing? Okay, let's do it again. And I'm doing it with him. Notice? So because the tendency for most of our partners is to go like this. You do the breathing so we can all hear it loud. Feelings are contagious, I want to point out in that little exercise. If I am tense and anxious, John will get tense and anxious. Okay? Alright, make yourself partners and just gently do it with each other for a moment. Okay. Lolly. This is not California, I think. In a moment. Okay, I think that's enough touching. This is not California where I came from.
I just want to tell everybody, I see some of you are writing very vigorously. There is a tape. This talk is being taped. And if you want a tape of the talk, complete with the exercises, you can leave a deposit. You can leave $5 in the back of the room and your name and address, and the tape will be mailed to you.
So this way you don't even have to write, you see. You can just listen and enjoy the Okay. What did most of you observe? Did you feel like more air went down the arms? Did you also know how challenging it was when you squeezed not to tighten embrace? Okay. Let's put the pieces together for a moment. So what I'm suggesting then is each time I have the opportunity to be challenged by a stressor or a difficulty, I look forward to it, right? And then at that moment when it occurs, I can sparkle to the right, sparkle to the left, or I can smile. Then I take a gentle deep breath, and I can gently exhale right down my arms and down my arms if they're straws. And as I do that, I let my jaw go slightly slack. I sort of let my shoulders go down and feel this air, kind of a warmth going right down my arms. Notice how short it takes? It takes only a few seconds, doesn't it? So even if I said, well, I don't have the time to do it, I probably could have the time to do it. Okay, why don't we just all practice together, okay? I'll sort of walk you through once. So as soon as stressor occurs, somebody cut in front of you in your car, at that moment you sort of sparkle to the right, sparkle to the left, or smile, nobody sees you. Right? You take a gentle deep breath in your abdomen. And now you just let the air go. Blow the air right down your arms. Now how does that feel? Now let's make it more automatic. I'm going to make a loud noise in a moment, and when you do it, that's instead of going, what's going on at that moment, I'm going to be gently sparkle, right? So sparkle right, sparkle left, take a gentle deep breath, and blow the air right down my arms, letting my neck and shoulders go slack as well. How does that feel? Now let's do it in our imagination as well. What I'd like you to do in a moment, not yet, in a moment I'd like you to mentally think of an episode for which you may feel some resentment, if that's possible. Or you maybe have some anger against somebody. I don't know if any of us have that. But assume there is something like that, and make it up. At that, what I'd like you to do is and the moment you get any sense of that internal tightening you feel, do that when you think about it, I'd like you to stop thinking about it and do this little mini exercise. Okay? Okay, so why don't you just close your eyes for a moment, start thinking about that stressful event, and then just quickly do this exercise. Did most of you do it? How did that feel? Did the feeling tone of the resentment or anger or stressor to change a bit? You feel a little bit better? Yes, minor? I'm not asking for a big step, really. I'm asking for a tiny step, because all these tiny steps build up during the day, and then they become a giant step. I could argue, why do I make a point of changing my mental attitude? Notice what I'm really doing? I keep pushing to say, when I'm stressed, like when I drive my car down the freeway, somebody cuts in front of me. The question I could ask, where is my locus of control? Who has control over me? Over the setting. Where is my control? Do I have control over the other driver? Yes, no? So really I am exposed to an uncontrollable setting. Would that be somewhat right? And what I have done in my brain, notice I'm going to make this purposely because I'll take some animal data in a moment. What I've done in my brain is saying, instead of saying, I have no control in this setting, notice, what did I do instead? I said, I have control over myself and I can do an action for myself. Is that clear? Now, why is that important? That kind of logic. Well, one, there's good evidence that if I gave this chronic alarm reactions, pathology will occur. You can take soldiers, for example, in World War II, expose them to 6 weeks of continuous battle, and you find that 30% of them will develop hypertension, and it will take a year or more following the withdrawal from battle to come down. And for some, it will never come down. That's one. Let me go to animal work, where the issue of control is critical. There's some lovely recent work done in the immune system. You know, asking how does our bodies fight cancer or any illnesses. And what you can do with lovely rats or mice, you can do a nice little study. And let me describe the study first. What you do is you get a group of mice or rats, you put them in a little cage, and then for an hour, you give them shocks. You know, mini electric shocks. They're not very nice. There's like a tingle. The mice or rats don't like it, I must say that. It's not very pleasant for them. But you give about 60 shocks in an hour. The distinction is that for half the group, they're going to have control to turn the shock off. Does that make sense? The shock occurs randomly, approximately once a minute. The rat, I'll do it as rats, the rat now quickly presses a bar or runs around the cage, but does something, and as the rat does something, the shock is turned off. Notice that rat experiences what? Control. The other rat is really known as a yoked control. It's not an egg, it's a yoke control. That means that the other rat gets the same shock as the first rat, except he has no control turning it on and off because the first rat controls that. Is that clear? So you cannot say it's the stimulus of the shock which will have the effect. So you can now do many groups, but the basic idea is you have one group of rats which have control over the shock, and the other one has inescapable shock. That's interesting. I mean, you know, you can just say that's an interesting study. Now, what it has to do with illness in rats? Well, you can take now these same rats, and now a couple of days later, you can inject them with tumor cells. What is, you know, normally rats would sort of not let the tumor multiply in their bodies. What you find is those rats which are in the inescapable condition are the ones whose tumor rejection rate goes way down. If that's clear. No? Yes? Is that not clear? I can do it in many different forms, or I can go take blood from these rats 24 hours later. I do a little different study, but it's about the same design. I withdraw the blood, I extract out the lymphocytes, which are the cells which now would protect us against illnesses at times, which are a part of our immune system. And again, those rats which have had inescapable shock, those lymphocyte cells do not seem to multiply. Or, if you now in vivo, now expose them to again tumor cells, you find a subcategory of these lymphocytes known as killer cells do not kill the tumor cells. As if a condition of inescapable shock leads us to a place of helplessness and hopelessness. Helplessness and hopelessness in human beings is highly associated with illness onset, which is just what I cited about the rats, the animal work. The human being, however, I think is luckier than the animal. And that's why I make such a big point about the little exercise. What is the difference for me? I think the animal probably is not aware, in a sense, that he or she has a choice. The human being has, I would say, awareness potential or consciousness present, so when they get stuck in an unavoidable situation, we have consciousness or awareness for which we can change it so we don't react that way. If that is clear. And here now I take that simple example of driving down the freeway. Someone cuts in front of us. If I just totally only get angry, or whatever one feels, blank, if I have that feeling tone there, and I feel sort of hopeless in the condition, then in fact I would say at some level my body reacts a little bit like that of the animals. You know, my immune system is suppressed, is turned off for a moment. On the other hand, because I put myself in a hopeless condition, or helpless. If on the other hand I shift that setting around, and now say I am taking charge, I'm doing something different, I become like the rats in some sense who can have control. And therefore my illness onset will likely be less. So I want to make a big point that it's the way we conceive the setting that is critical. And that's why the imagery, the thoughts tie in so often. That's why I start. The limits of our beliefs are the limits of our experience. I can have this glass here. It's like there's nothing new about this glass. It's half full or half empty. Well, it's 3/4 full in my case. It's mainly full, or people could look at the emptiness side of it. And depending which frame of reference I start taking, one frame will tend to go toward illness more, and one frame will tend to go toward health. And so that's the purpose of this little funny exercise. But it's mainly because now, instead of being a passive victim, which so many of us are, we often feel victimized, which leads us to pathology. I can now say, even if I cannot control the person outside of me, I can at least take charge of me. And if hopefully that's the place what I want to encourage today. So let me do one more little exercise which hopefully will be helpful. And that is, we talked about breathing illicitly, that we held our breaths. Is that right? We are not unique. It's really remarkable. Let me give an example. When you work the Dartmouth ski team, then what you find is people ski, they go down the slot, they go, this downhill skiing where you go quite fast, like 80 miles an hour on 2 skis. Well, when you take high school kids and they start increasing their speeds to 60 or 70, they tend to get a little bit scared sometimes. And when they get scared, what do? They stop breathing, and then what happens, they sometimes hold their breath so much they literally almost fall, they almost pass out, which is not very healthy on the slopes. It is not unique to skiers. We took the rhythmic gymnastics team to Colorado Springs. It was a different environment. They did their exercise on the mat, and then they all ran out of breath. You're at 6,000 feet, you get altitude. They ran out of breath much too soon. And then you observe them carefully during their practices, which should be automatic. What happens? They hold their breath during all the difficult components of their routines. And these are the athletes who allegedly have trained for it. We do the same. We hold our breaths all the time. So hopefully, please keep breathing. If I asked a simple task for you to stand up or sit down, most of you would hold your breath. Let me give an example. Any of you ever had back pain? Any of you ever gone to a doctor and he gave you a little exercise to go like this? You lie on the floor and you go, is that familiar? Ever seen people do it? How do they do it? They go like this. You're shaking your head? Is that familiar? What they're doing, they're getting themselves all ready, they're fighting, and they hold their breath. If they could only continue to breathe, most likely one feels the health will be mobilized. It's like when I hold my breath, I freeze. And in fact, we want flexibility for health. And so, in any activity, as you're writing notes feverishly, I tend to hold my breath probably. Would that be right? Okay. Most of us tend to breathe, and then we finish the sentence and go, and it's not easy. The question also is, how do you breathe, which we haven't dealt with. And I want to spend a few minutes about that, because I can breathe becoming more panicky and or more excited. And sometimes if I feel too sleepy in the morning, I feel, I can take my cup of coffee, I can breathe one way or the other. But mainly what I want to aim for is to breathe more quietly. And if the one skill of breathing is to breathe, I would say, more diaphragmatically, I would say our health will be improved again. Now, how can I breathe more diaphragmatically? Let me just paint how breathing occurs, okay? Do you mind? A little anatomy. If I look at the most efficient way of breathing, I could think of the chest as a bell jar, and at the bottom of this bell jar, imagine there's a kind of rubber diaphragm, which sort of sits like this. When I inhale, without any effort, these muscles tighten. Notice how it went down? That means this liquid mass has to move somewhere. So this liquid mass, known as my abdomen, has to move outward. So my tummy bubbles out more. And then when I exhale, I probably tighten my muscle of my abdomen if I stand up and push this back in. That will be called the least effortful breathing. Yet many of us tend to breathe like this. Let me do it paradoxically, like this. Are you familiar with that? I presume 20% or more of you breathe that way. Just take a quick deep breath and see which parts move. Notice for a number of you, this part really went up. Think of yourself much more like filling like a bottle. You know, you fill a bottle of liquid, what happens? The bottom fills up first, and then slowly it comes up. It's more in that model of breathing. Or the other way to do it is I could have an upside down umbrella. Notice I'm using imagery to get the access to this place. I can think of an upside down umbrella, which sort of sits here, and as I inhale, this umbrella opens up, and as I exhale, the umbrella closes. And I do it very slowly. Inhale, exhale. However, if I breathe that way, this liquid mass has to go somewhere. Didn't I say? And I wonder if you just want to check how you're sitting. Just check for a moment. Take another breath in here and see how it feels. And now what I'd like you all to do is, I'd like you to all to loosen your belt. Because if you wear tight form-fitting jeans, there's no way that this liquid mass can move anywhere. And it's difficult to do this, you know, because we have many images, stereotypes. Remember I talked about imagery? What is our image of good looking? I mean, in ladies or men. You're supposed to look like this, right? Like an anorexic, filled-in stomach. Isn't that how we're supposed to look? And then, you know, and if we're not quite there, what we do is we buy one size too small jeans, and we get them wet and we melt into them. Or we put it, you know, we take in a belt and we tie it really nice and tight. Isn't that how we normally do it? And so I need to allow that to occur, because if I don't do this, if I hold this tight, then it means that every breath I take, I'm forced to breathe high up in my chest. Would that be right? If I breathe high up in my chest, I tend to trigger an alarm reaction. It's just pure physiology. There's nothing very much to do with whether you're really anxious or not. You tend to breathe up in here. That tends to trigger for the body a more alarm reaction. And most of us in this world, we give too many alarm reactions. We need to learn the inverse. It's intriguing, for example, if you go to the ICU unit in a hospital, that literally every heart attack patient will breathe high up in their chest. Or you can look at other, you know, you can hear people speak, like some of the hypertensives, they go like this, and then I talk again. Ever hear that nice breathing in between talking? That kind of voice, that air being rushed in? Is that familiar? That again, it tends to be like this. And then I can talk again. You see, I puffed myself up so I can strut along. In a way. So the question really is, how can I shift it around to a lower, less effortful breathing? So I ask you to loosen your belt, remember? To maybe undo the upper button of your pants, of your jeans, or your skirt. Or if you wear pantyhose, just cut the elastic a bit. You know, we laugh, but how many of you go home tonight and you take your clothing off and it feels so nice to get rid of your shoes? Any of you? You know, that means that the whole day long, my body is adapting and compensating for my funny clothing. And that's a certain amount of strain and stress. I'll do this humorously from an operation done in Texas for people who have back injury. People who have back problems, what they found out in Texas that it really works because all these Texans allegedly, you know, wear these 10-gallon hats and jeans, and they drive these bucket seats. And what they found for a number of patients, and that's real serious now, all they had to do was to remove the wallet out of the back pocket. They did a wallectomy operation. Because if I sit in my bucket seat, what happens with this big bulging wallet? You know how you sit like this? You compensate. Put strain in your back. No wonder you would feel worse. I'm really being serious. If we feel that sense of exhaustion, some of you get GI distress, is that familiar? Slight upsets. If this area is held constricted by my clothing, or if I don't breathe in that area, probably I can improve my general health and well-being and reduce my exhaustion if I can breathe more diaphragmatically. Now just note, gently breathe now more lower. Since all of you have now undone your button of your pants, I'll remind you in a moment when you all leave to tighten again, so don't feel worried. And also ask yourself, you know, what images come up? And I really am serious, because we don't even know the cultural images which have been part of us. You know, if I let my stomach bubble out, I'm a slob. Isn't that something? sucking your stomach, you know, military style. Whatever those images are. In fact, if you could breathe more down here, you'll find your tone of your abdominal recti muscles will increase. Because they're going to be done doing some work versus the clothing holding them up. So in fact, your tone, in the sense of your muscular system, will improve if I could allow myself to breathe here. But just breathe this way. How does that feel? Feel more easy than when your belts were tight? Yes, no? Now the question is, how come you don't do this all the time like that? You're right. I mean, we forget we are critters of habit. You know, we wear clothing which automatically, you know, tight belt automatically constricts me this way. There's no option. Yes? I am not saying that the only thing that happens is just that you sort of sit like this. And you go. No. But think of the model of the umbrella. Or look at a little baby. How many of you own babies? I mean, only in California, right? You know. I have a dog, so I'll always look at my dog. But if you look at little babies breathe, how do they breathe? Notice when they're relaxing, it's this area that breathes, and it isn't just this area that breathes. The whole body breathes. It's yes, the predominant pattern would be the movement in here. And it's three-dimensional. It's this way. There's some movement in here. It's a sense of flexibility. What happens for most of us in our culture is that we often only breathe like this. You know, we puff ourselves up unknowingly. And I would say that if I can encourage people to do slow, diaphragmatic breathing, which we can do under most conditions, there are very few conditions where we need to really super expand to go, you know. It's very seldom. I'm not asking for frozenness in here. I'm not asking that you hold this tight. I ask this area to be totally loose, which is different, and to get a kind of general movement. If you can encourage people to do that, and if you can teach them to warm their hands at the same time, then those people who are hypertensive will lose their blood pressure. I mean, their blood pressure will become normotensive. Let me just take that study for a moment, because it's a direct following of this. As you know, hypertension affects probably 30 million Americans or so, or even more. It seems to be associated with the increase in mortality, morbidity. What can you do? Well, some lovely study developed at Manager Foundation by Green and Norris and Steve Ferrian. Those are the authors. And what they have done really is teach the hypertensives who are on medication and not on medication. Makes no difference. I want to point it out. They essentially teach them a couple of very, I would say almost very simplistic approaches. And what do they teach them? They teach them to warm their hands. Some of you noticed when you blew the air down your arms, you could feel your hands almost warming up. Any of you noted that slightly? A few of you, right? Now imagine you could do that more. It takes, others need imagery. You know, you could think of lying on the beach, you know, in the Bahamas, to think of the sun just pouring down your arms. Others, you know, whatever is your image. But after a while you can learn voluntarily to warm your hands. And they ask the hypertensives to warm their hands and feet. What that means, however, is when I warm my hands and feet, I essentially dilate my blood vessels. That's all I'm doing. Notice it. And it's the inverse of the alarm reaction. The alarm reaction, my blood vessels in the periphery go. Now I'm reducing that. It dilates. When the blood vessels open up, the peripheral resistance decreases or my blood pressure drops. That's another way of saying it. That's one. And you teach the people to warm their hands to about 95 degrees. So you go real hot-handed. You ask them to do it for about twice a day for 10 minutes. You teach them to warm their feet to 93 degrees. About twice a day. So notice you really get an opening of the blood vessels. That means blood takes less effort or less pressure to be pumped through the tubing. That's really what you're saying. And in addition, you teach the people to breathe, or simultaneously, to breathe very slowly diaphragmatically. And as they breathe very slowly diaphragmatically, they quiet down It reduces their sympathetic arousal and encourages the warming of the hands. You ask me this many times during the day. And what you find on the average in 23 weeks of practice, notice, it's not simple, that over 80% of the people will become normotensive, which is really remarkable. I cannot express how remarkable it is. That means that people who had hypertension for 10 years and were on medication, that when they truly practiced, their blood pressure will become normotensive. And that is equal to 95% of hypertensive patients. It's probably the nicest strategy of self-regulation I know. However, also note that doing that means I probably changed my way of being a tiny bit. You know, instead of when my boss yells at me, now it's just a lovely opportunity to blow the air down my arms. I react a little differently, notice? And so I would say there's good data that doing these strategies allows me to prevent illness onset in case I don't have it. Now remember, if I did a poll of this group, if we gave you all a physical today, any idea how many of you, what percentage would be healthy, medically defined healthy, who wouldn't per se have symptoms? Would 50% of you not have symptoms? 30? Any idea? Statistically, approximately 10% of you would say I'm healthy and medically you wouldn't have any symptoms. On the average, 60% of you would say I'm sort of healthy and we would find symptoms or pathology in you. And 30% would agree, I feel sick and I have sickness. So that means in fact that most of us carry already some illness in us. So most of us can do these stress reduction techniques to, I would say, to maintain health or prevent future illness onset. And the other part, I think, is these kinds of strategies allow us to optimize our health. Gosh, I realize I'm talking too long. Let me go on for a second. What I'd like to shift, I realize I've just done my introduction. I have never turned my page, I don't know what happened. Okay, what I'd like to do for a moment is I think I've made the point of that breathing, continue to breathe, learn relaxation techniques. Why do I want to focus on learning profound relaxation techniques? And for that part, there are two. One reason for learning profound relaxation techniques, when I'm profoundly relaxed, it allows my body to re-establish its own health, to reset the thresholds, to reach a less effortful level of homeostasis. That's one. The second, it's the precondition for imagery. And in imagery, I can do almost anything. And let me do two parts on imagery now, and then I'll put these together. For imagery, I can use it to see myself healing. Many of you may be familiar with the work by Simonton. Is that familiar? How many of you have read Simonton's book? Okay. I'll just find it and what that means. What Carl Simonton did, like many others, he found that if people could image the self-healing of cancer in their imagination, that for some of them at least, they responded to the cancer treatment more potently, better. They responded better to treatment. As if imagery is one way to work to heal myself. And let me give two examples so it will make sense. Recently at the about 4 weeks before the World Championship, one of our gymnasts got themselves injured. That's a disaster. Her ankle got injured. And what she did for those weeks is to truly image the ankle healing. And she still had massive pain, and then while she was imaging her ankle healing, when she was profoundly relaxed, she saw it healing, and equally, just before the performance, she saw herself doing the performance perfectly. On the mat, doing a perfect, with an ankle that worked perfectly. And what's so exciting for her is that in fact her imagery became the reality. We have seen that many times. That's one. That's mild. It's not very big, healing. A lovely case which you can write to probably is to Pat Norris at the Manager Foundation, who worked with a little boy about 6 years old who had a brain tumor, a severe brain tumor. And the little boy was really moribund. There was no more medical treatment impossible for this little boy. His tumor kept growing. His brain on the CAT scans was totally already deformed, moved over, squashed. He had lost coordination. He's a mess. And what she did was, with this boy who was supposed to really would have died, she guided him through imagery. And instead of doing imagery like medicine, you know, she guided this little boy through imagery to treat his own tumor. And this little boy played space war. You know, he got these ships, and they went all the way through his brain. He would chase down all his tumor cells and kill them. And in fact, depending on the imagery you use, at least how people come up with it, at least for some, it is a very powerful technique. I'm not worrying whether you use imagery or you think about it. You know, I make not much separation at the moment. Anyway, this little boy did this, and the tumor stopped enlarging. And in fact, on the next CAT scan, the tumor shrunk, which is real remarkable because it's very seldom you have such nice, vivid imagery. You know, data on a CAT scan. That's scientific. And by the end of about 4 months, or 6 months, I guess, the little boy said to Pat, you know, I went through my brain, there were no more aliens there, or whatever you call those things. On the next CAT scan, his brain was totally clean. It's a remarkable story, because it's, you know, and I would say kids are very good at it. I mean, I'm impressed time and time again that kids appear much better at doing this. Now, I'm purposely pausing there because it is not that we as adults cannot be just as good. It's my personal experience and almost my belief that what a child does, they just do it. You know, they just image. You know, when you see a child image, they start yelling and screaming. They don't stay nice and polite and lighter. It becomes totally real. You know, you look at your little child, right? As if there's a real person there. It becomes multi-sensory, isn't it? I mean, those who have seen kids do it, it becomes really real. And the other thing they haven't done yet, and I think that makes us different, is they haven't said to themselves, I cannot. I don't believe it. Somehow, I don't quite know, many of us, when we hit puberty, when we get we become self-conscious. And in that process of self-consciousness, we start saying, I should not or I cannot. I'm also totally clear that these abilities to change, to facilitate healing is not age contingent. I'll never forget an older woman who worked in her 80s in Berkeley. I know that makes it a strange place. But still, a lovely woman who had hypertension for many, many years. And we taught her some relaxation techniques and ways of warming her hands. And within 2 weeks, her blood pressure dropped to normal and stayed that way. It's a remarkable story. What it shows is that if I'm open and willing, I think we do have the potential for growth. And I finally found a label for a disease which many of us carry as adults, why I think at times imagery and these techniques are not facilitatory, and that's called cyclosclerosis. Most of you know arteriosclerosis, right? The hardening of the arteries. Cyclosclerosis, the hardening of the attitudes. And I mean that because what I mean by that is the attitude which says I cannot, it's impossible. All the buts. You know, and I just smile because I'll go back, because we did a little exercise in Sun Valley with the skiers, where we did a kind of exercise which we would say means you have to you have to sort of obey, you know, you have to sort of forget about your scientific thinking, just do it. Don't critically analyze it. What was intriguing, all the kids on the ski team did it and had the experience except the coach. And, no, the coach was really lovely. I laugh at this. We laugh at it. The coach did it, and he said to himself, this experiment is impossible. He's trained as an engineer. We asked a little exercise where we had a string with a washer. Any of you do this at home, do it, seriously. Your kids will do it 100%. What you do is you take a string, hold it in your hand, and put a washer on it. And now you just look at the washer and just imagine the washer start going around in a circle or swinging to you. Some of you must have done that at one time or another. Right? And the washer starts moving for you. Is that right? For most of you. For kids, when they do this, you just tell them the washer's going to move, the washer will move. I know the image of my brain moves my muscles, moves my hands. I'm willing to say that. However, it's not perceived that way inside you. It just feels like the washer moves by itself. And what's exciting is the coach really said to himself, no, that is impossible. The washer can't move, it just stays there. You know, he was totally right. For him, his image confirmed his experience. I want to give this coach equally credit because he was also truly open. We talked to him later and said, look, you know, all the kids could do it, so you're outnumbered. Basically, you know, go home, really relax. In that sense, put away your previous preconceived experience of what reality ought to be. When he then did that, and that's why I have to really respect him. I really have high respect for him, genuinely so. Is that when he then came back the next morning, he had a kind of smile because he truly, practiced a number of, and found the washer would move for him as well. And that's a major step in terms of shifting belief. And he was even willing to share it to the other athletes, which is remarkable. So it's mainly, I think, our limits of our beliefs. I think if we change our limits of our beliefs, we may potentially be a facilitatory partner in our own healing. I think that's the way I would want to frame it. You know, I can only facilitate, who knows to what extent, where my path of healing goes. The question is, can I, instead of being the inescapable rat, the inescapable, unavoidable shocked rat, can I not be that? Can I choose to take control? And imagery ways of healing are such strategies. So what I like to do is then guide you through a momentary self-healing exercise. What I'll do is I'll use the breathing as the relaxation. And I know relaxation takes a long time. Then I'm going to ask you to look at an area of body discomfort. Most of you probably have some discomfort somewhere. Any of you don't have anything like this, then sort of forget my words and just see yourself imaging an event or phenomenon you'd like to have occur. For yourself. Okay. Well, I'll guide you through for a moment for relaxation and other imagery, because in some sense, let me just do that. Okay. Why don't you start again pressing your ankles together, pressing your knees together, pressing your buttocks together, pull your anus right to your belly button, bring your arms up in front of you, make them real tight, tighter and tighter. How many of you are still breathing? Good. Okay, now let it all go limp and loose. Now let yourself just quietly keep breathing, as if each exhalation the air can go right down your arms, as if there are flexi straws inside. And as you're doing that, each time you inhale, think of your abdomen bubbling out, and each time you exhale, let the abdomen gently fall in, as if the upside down umbrella inside of me gently opens and closes. And in that process, each time you inhale, feel yourself in a way connected to almost a larger sense of healing energy in the universe. So on the inhalation, I could almost imagine pulling this right through me. And on the exhalation, I can let it pour it right through me out again. Also, it just cycles right through me. So on the inhalation, I can feel this energy coming in. And on the exhalation, I can feel it passing right through me. And as I can do this, then continually I say to myself, on the inhalation I am, and the exhalation relaxed. And all the time as I say this quietly to myself, on the inhalation I am, and the exhalation relaxed, I can feel a kind of healing energy going right through me on the inhalation and passing right through me on the exhalation, allowing me to get quieter, tranquil, peaceful, and more centered. Now be quiet for a minute while you allow this just to quieter and deepen for yourself. And now for a moment, I'd like you to just gently look at an area of discomfort in your body with your eyes sort of closed. That's you may have some tightness or whatever, or ache, a place you feel worried about. And just inspect that area for an instant, however it is. And now I'd like you to shift that image that you see it healing. So however you saw it upon the inspection, I'd like you now to imagine making a strategy, a mechanism to see it healing. If I saw my area of discomfort as a big black blob, and to be healthy means that it's just it's not there, maybe I can imagine, a little man to come by and start cleaning it all up. Whatever is my strategy. For some of you, you can see it as biology. For others, you can just see it like you whitewash it. For a third, you develop a whole elaborate kind of mechanism. But really get a sense of a process of healing to occur. If I saw, for example, muscles being very tight, like held with bound springs, I could maybe slowly see the springs being unscrewed and loosening up. I don't know what is for you. But for the moment, I really work at a strategy, a way, a mechanism to see the healing occurring. And now, I imagine myself feeling totally well and healthy. So whatever I saw upon the inspection, I see it disappear, and imagine myself feeling totally well and healthy. And I could continue to think on each inhalation, I could feel a kind of healing, organized energy going into me, and on my exhalation just goes right through my whole body, so that I'm part of a universal stream. And then knowing that I can do this anytime, anywhere for myself. I realize, in fact, the more I do these types of practices, I can facilitate possibly much more my own healing potential and contribute in a way, help to mobilize the health within me. So now it is almost like feel like you're feeling filled like with a smile inside of you. With each inhalation, I can feel like an internal smile occurring. And then I gently take a deep breath. I just sort of start flexing my arms. Just be gentle with your neighbors. And open my eyes. What did you experience? What happened to your discomfort? Did it change? Like what? Gosh, that's $25. The tightness in the neck is gone. So in this little practice, your hands feel totally warm. So in a way, you could see that here's or parts of it are ways if I can do this more during the day. It doesn't have to be as elaborate. I could potentially do this, keep myself warm. I could not have to do this kind of physiological illness. I could also see myself performing a task like a public lecture or whatever my work is involved. I could see myself taking an exam and staying real calm as I see myself then accessing all the information almost automatically, which I've studied for. Notice how I can use in different strategies. Others. None. All of you feel so quiet and peaceful. What I just want to point out is that we can take this home. I think the more we do it, the more I can make myself part and allow these types of practices to do. I think I can contribute to my healing potential. I want to just end really for a moment with a note that here's what I can do. Most likely I'm not omniscient. Me. And so in a way, that's why I partly pulled asking for a kind of healing to flow through me, because who quite knows maybe what needs to be done. In fact, I'm part of a kind of universal flow. Well, thank you for coming, and I'll be open for questions. I realize it's 4 o'clock already. Yes? The question is, are these relaxation techniques helpful with allergies? I would say genuinely, or it's our experience and from the literature, for example, the literature of autogenic training, that for many allergic people, if they practice the stress reduction techniques many times during the day, as if their reactivity decreases. Yes. I'm willing to say it also helps to reduce the allergenic trigger around you initially. And for many people it seems that they can breathe quieter, more diaphragmatically, possibly do imagery. There's lovely data that the allergic response can be totally inhibited. I can think of a couple of specific cases. One of them is a case by Judith Green, who worked with a little boy who had a kind of allergic reaction to, I think, feathers or something like that. They did this profound relaxation, did imagery techniques. Finally had the person be in their imagery, this is about an 8-year-old little kid, in their imagery see the organism, a feathery bird at a distance, and slowly till he could cuddle it in his hands. And then they brought the real object. They had a little bird, they had, I think, some Easter ducks or whatever you call those, chicks, you know, and they brought that, and the little boy could even play with that without ever getting an allergic reaction. So I think if I inhibit, I could say when I trigger my alarm reaction, I bring my kind of, you could say allergies is an excessive response of the immune system for a moment, or too reactive. If I get quieter, I think I do allow the system to balance out. And the evidence is highly suggestive, and I'll keep it the word suggestive, I happen to believe it. The research is suggestive that in fact you can inhibit in a number of people the peak of the allergic response, especially in kids. If you want to take the category of asthma, we've had some nice success with asthmatics, especially with little kids. You can, if you teach the little asthmatic kids to breathe more diaphragmatically, react less to triggers. We've had lovely success with a little asthmatic little boy, 6 years old, who twice a month was hospitalized. At the end of about 4 weeks of training, could sort of have kind of voluntary control over his breathing, and in the next 6 months had only one asthmatic attack, which he aborted in the middle by himself with his mother's guidance. And so I think it is possible. I genuinely believe that many allergic reactions are an excessive reactivity. And if I can learn not to react somehow, then most likely I'll reduce that amplification. There's good data, for example, which it goes way beyond our limits of our belief. That is from autogenic training, that you can work, for example, with hemophiliac kids who don't clot, but if you teach them autogenic training and the kind of relaxation techniques, their clotting time shortens. So that's an extreme case of pathology. Okay. If you're intrigued in techniques for kids, if you're allergies, then the relaxation techniques such as the quieting response or the Kitty QR by Liz Strobel from the Institute of Living at Hartford, Connecticut. There are a lot of relaxation techniques you can do with little kids. You know, many of us have done it. You know, you make little kids dolls or whatever. Others. Yes?
What about holding breath during yoga asanas?
Okay, the question really is, what about holding breath during yoga asanas? I would say during those, that's a unique condition. Because it's my belief that in most conditions I want to continue to breathe during exertion. So if I do weightlifting, I want to exhale. If I do karate, on the power stroke, I want to exhale. If you want to do a weight, you know, a cobra or whatever, or you lift your legs very slowly, right in the cobra position, you go, I think that's how you go up, right, with the legs. I want to breathe into those conditions. If I continue to breathe, I have less possibility of damaging myself. However, if you think of pranayama techniques, breath can be used to change consciousness. And so now when you ask about yoga techniques, it depends how do you want to use the breath for what. So I mean, if you just hold your breath during the asana, then I think I would maybe want to change and keep breathing. If you use the breath distinctly with instruction to know, to purposely do the certain breath techniques to change your awareness or body, that's a different step. I mean, so I'm not sure I answered your question. Yes? I would say that, let me answer, the statement is, another alternative technique for hypertension is to look at the sphygmomanometer and look at the dial and see it going down with each breath. I would say that's a lovely imagery. I have no critique. I don't want to do it or. It's not one or the other. My sense is that physiologically, that blood pressure, if the blood vessels constrict, i.e. which I can do by cooling my hands, then I increase the peripheral resistance, which means that my blood pressure must go up in order to get the same amount of blood flow to go through. So I would say that the warming of the hands is a way, and you have to really warm them a lot, to let the blood vessels dilate, which is a mechanistic approach in some sense, to reduce blood pressure. I think that's, I would want to say I would want to do both. I would say do this, and at the same time I can imagine. I don't see any conflict with that imagining. For a few people, if you focus on the symptom area, they'll get panicky. So, here you have to check. Again, although I talk about techniques, they're always idiosyncratic, adaptable for each of us. Like for the hypertensive, if they look at this dial, for a few people, just imaging this dial, their blood pressure will go up. Most of us learn to adapt, and it can be very lovely. It's like a sense of, okay, I'm doing it right. And I see the pressure going down, and I would simultaneously feel my hands and feet warming. You need to do both. The legs have to warm as well. What happens if you look at blood flow or blood volume, what you see is that as the temperature, which would be the y-axis increases, and this is blood volume, as the temperature here, let's say, is 95. You see, you have to increase radically the blood volume to get a small change in temperature, if that's clear, this axis I just drew. And so I would want to go with my personal preference would be going with the warming of the hands, the lot of slow breathing, and I think doing that type of imagery is perfectly useful as well. Well, in a sense, I mean the whole periphery, the arms, the hands and feet. I think that's hard enough. The rest will take care of itself. For many people, warming, it takes them often 6 or 7 sessions to warm their hands. The feet come in often by 12 or 14 sessions, and it takes a while to get it that high. When you have 95-degree hands, you're hot-handed. It takes a while of practice. Others? Yes?
I was curious, what are your theories on children being born with the ability to image, but as they grow from especially the age of 6 or 7 up to 20, they lose the ability to image?
The question is, what do I think about the observation that as children get older, they tend to lose their ability to image? And what are the theories? I don't know. I mean, it's an observational phenomenon which I know need not to occur. That's why I gave the example of the older woman who had hypertension. And I know other cases like that. At least what I hear about when you talk about people who are very near critical illness, almost facing death, then often they are willing to be open again, as if they have given up their cultural beliefs and biases. And I think the shift, is as we get older, instead of just allowing to know what is, I accept, in a sense, I integrate the social stereotypes and beliefs. They become part of me. I mean, I've learned no. And so I automatically say it's impossible. And I think when I say it is not possible, in fact, it's probably right. It isn't possible for me. And maybe I'll give a little scientific story for that from research by a study by Edward Taub teaching people to warm their hands. If you knew in about late 60s, biofeedback was just starting. That's a technique to use electronic equipment to listen to your own body. And in the early 70s, it was not possible. People fought to warm your hands and feet. Many of you already had the experience, right? Even here. So at least it doesn't, but at least people didn't think it was possible. Ed Taub had a grant from the Armed Services, and he had a study where he was teaching people to warm their hands and feet. He had a technician who did it. He did it very carefully, and the technician was uniformly unsuccessful, regardless how they changed the research design to warm the hands and feet of their subjects, the hands in that case. He practiced for a year, the studies. No success. To his sadness, the technician got married and left. He got himself another technician because she was real good. And to his surprise, then they flipped the whole research design around, I should point out. To his surprise, the next time the new technician trained people, she was successful teaching 19 out of 20 people to warm their hands and feet. Or their hands, just not feet. That's a big difference from none to 19 out of 20. and real significantly. Well, then they did a whole series of studies. They went right back to the initial research design. It made no difference. The second technician was successful in teaching on the average 19 out of 20 people to warm their hands. And you could ask, what's the difference? And it seems to be the person in the loop, in the setting, is critical. You see, the person in the setting not only is the verbal expression, we transmit our unknowing biases. The second technician believed or knew from self-experience it was possible. The first one didn't believe it was impossible. That's the major difference. So there was a different expectancy put on. And I think we underestimate in our culture or our living how contagious our beliefs, expectancies are. I mean, emotions and feelings are highly contagious, the most contagious disease I know of. It's because we are not separate. It's the myth that we think that you and I are separate. In fact, we are contiguous and interconnected. And my feeling tones, to a certain extent, will affect you and vice versa. It's a mutual dance, even if we don't know. So in research, it's lovely because you have this hard data to show it, how belief affects you. And I think what happens is, as we get older, to answer that question again, we live in a world where we get inculcated it's not possible. And in fact, I've experienced some of that. I do certain things, it doesn't work, therefore I generalize inappropriately. Usually what it means when I cannot do it, it means I choose not to spend the time to learn the skills to do it. If you hear a different vocabulary. I'll say it again. When I tend to say I can't, the way I would want to reframe that vocabulary, say, I choose not to spend the time to learn that skill. So I'm going to say I cannot do mathematics. Most of us can do math if we choose to spend the time to do it. What happens? We tend to spend our time at things which we like to do, which may not be mathematics. Or, many of the women here probably would say, I cannot fix my car. I mean, that's a judgmental statement. Would that be sort of right? I can't fix my car? Well, let's say your transmission is out of whack. I would say most of us would say we can't. But we really are saying, I haven't spent the time learning how to take the transmission apart and putting it back together again. I think most of us could learn most skills if we choose to. And I think that's where the distinction starts lying. As we get older, we get those kinds of almost cultural, familial, family images. It's intriguing, these start real early. You can look at body kids, Ever looked at little kids? And you look at the parents? Did you ever notice that, if parents walk like this in the world? That kids walk like that? And they can be about 2 to 4 years old? Is that familiar? What's intriguing is, you could say, well, that's genetic, isn't it? What's even more intriguing, you can take adopted kids, babies, put them in families, and the babies will mimic just how their parents tend to walk. So if you look at a family, you'll often see one of the kids will walk just like the mom, one of them, it doesn't have to be sexually bound. One of them will walk like the dad, and the third one will walk like both of them. And the exciting part is that it's probably not functionally or structurally bound. We do bring structure with us. We learn often by imitation. Kids learn really, I think most of us have learned not by the words our parents said, we learn to imitate. Don't do as I do, do as I say. It's imitation learning. And I think that's where we see our limits. Our imitations are, who are our heroes? What are our limits? In that sense, I feel lucky being here sometimes, because I work with this lady here, Dora Koons, because, here she's in her late 70s and she's sparkling alive. Well, my image of old age wants to be like that. You see, so I'm going to start looking at older people who are more like her than some of the people who sit around watching TV the whole day. Both are images. And if you ask how many hours we spend watching TV a day, on the average family watches 6 hours a day or something. If you and I don't do it for 6 hours, somebody else must do it for 12. It's quite a high number. Imagine the images which are portrayed who we are to be. What are socials, and we do start acting upon those. So maybe I'll end with the note, be careful with imagery pollution. It may become true. Thank you.